Very nice.
Actually, Marianne, could I just have a glass of water?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So the reception seemed very good last night.
Yes, it was good. It was good.
And through in 4 minutes.
No, it's always a bit daft.
It must be very hard on you people as well to try to
Well,
answer
it is.
questions.
You never quite, you don't kind of find your stride quite.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And each one has a different tempo. Each
Yes.
interviewer has a different tempo.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
John Madden, welcome back to Dallas.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here. We appreciate your coming and bringing your new film, Captain Corelli's Mandolin.
Uh-huh.
I loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you. As I told you, I had a lot of anticipation about this picture. I was really eager to see it. And it more than lived up to my expectations.
Good, I'm pleased.
This deals with a part and an incident in World War II that many people are not familiar with.
No, nor are they in Europe, actually. It's a very, very little known aspect of the war. And obviously it's a traumatic episode in Italian military history and Second World War history. It's never been formally acknowledged by Germany, what happened there. Don't want to give the game away to people who haven't seen the film, but you know, there's a sort of tragic circumstance that is the climax of the film. Although the film, as you know, for most of its length, doesn't really deal with, well, it deals with a war that isn't happening, which is another thing that makes it unusual as a story. What we used to call in England the phony war. The war that was theoretically happening but not actually happening.
As an Englishman, did you know any of that period of history?
I did. Well, I mean, I know that period of history, but not about that part of the world. And it was the film, as you know, is an adaptation of a book by Louis de Bernières, book which is hugely successful in England but much less well known here. And that book has really brought this story to light. I mean, amazingly, it hasn't actually even been written about even in Italian literature, although it's been documented somewhat, but it's never featured in their literature or fiction, cinematic or otherwise, so it's rather odd. Now a lot of people know about it, of course.
Was it in any sense at all based on certain individuals?
There's quite a lot of discussion about models for the character of Captain Corelli. I mean, he is actually a fictional creation, but there was a man, there was a television program made actually that came out in England around about the same time as the film opened, called The Real Captain Corelli. There was a man called Pamploni who was an Italian officer serving on that island. And there are certain aspects of the story that resemble his, but no, it's not really. It's a fictional creation of Louis on Louis's part.
Nicolas Cage, of course, plays Captain Corelli, and he has an Italian accent.
Yes.
And in an Italian military uniform.
Yes.
And he actually plays the mandolin.
Mm-hmm. He does. I mean, the part was full of challenges for him, which is one of the things I think that attracted him about the role. You know, he's one of those actors who really likes to do things he hasn't done before, and something about the character really kind of clicked with him, I think. It plays to all of his strengths. But he did have to, he had to take on certain things in it. I mean, there are a lot of things he has to do in the film that he's not used to doing, singing and playing the mandolin amongst them. So there was no option really but to have him learn it, and that's what he did for the film. He learned how to play it. He's very modest about it and says, well, I learned how to play the songs I play in the movie, which is true, but he proved to be extraordinarily dexterous. He's actually playing. I won't say it's his performance on the soundtrack, but that's only because when you do those scenes, you have to do them to playback. And also the instrument he's playing in the film didn't sound great. It looked great, but we used a more modern instrument for the soundtrack.
But he is actually playing the notes.
Oh, yeah.
And then, excuse me, he is actually playing the notes, but then the track that we hear in the movie is someone else playing a different instrument. Is that what you mean?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, any scene in a film that has music, what we call source music, in other words, music that you could either playing from a radio or a band or an instrument. The only way that you can do that and keep the synchronization is to pre-record the music, and then you play back the music in the scene, and the characters mime to it. Otherwise, the tempo changes all the time, and you get lost. So he is playing what you see, or what you hear, I should say. He is playing, although, yeah, it's another instrument that you're hearing on the soundtrack.
Would you say that the battle scenes were the most difficult part of doing this film for you, the director?
They were. I mean, there are a lot of things in the film that were difficult to do for one reason or another. Probably the most difficult it was the climactic scene in the film, which I don't want to talk about. But the battle they are immensely demanding to do those things, and I had a particular feeling about the way I wanted it to feel, because it's kind of unusual, because it sort of comes out of nowhere and it's very chaotic and desperate when it happens in the film. And creating something messy and kind of all over the place like that would seem to be easy, because you just switch the camera on and see what happens. But actually it requires very careful coordination so that the audience doesn't lose their way completely in it. And it was a circumstance in which the people who were fighting were very confused about what was going on as well. But I always am amazed in those things by how far behind, technologically speaking, that aspect of filmmaking is. In these days where you can digitize anything, an actor, an airplane, a tank, or whatever you want, the business of creating explosions on screen is still very, very, very kind of Heath Robinson almost. You have to run wires, and it takes forever and ever and ever. You have these kind of rather primitive little devices that detonate them, and they take hours to reset. And I can tell you that the combination there, particularly of black smoke, 110-degree temperatures, and sunscreen, is an absolutely hideous combination. It was very, very difficult to do.
But you used actual tanks and actual airplanes. I mean, did you have some of them that were animated in CG?
Yeah, the aeroplane situation, I mean, specifically the thing that turned that battle around was that quite unexpectedly it was an enormous presence of Stukas, an attack aircraft, a German aircraft that used to deliver its bombs in a vertical dive. Essentially that's how the Italian resistance on the island was overwhelmed. But there are very, very, very few of those around anymore. I think there's like one that's practical, and that was at work on Band of Brothers, which was shooting at the same time as we were. And they had actually most of the available hardware. But everything you see on the ground is real. I would be fibbing if I said the airplanes were. But to be honest with you, what you can do digitally with airplanes now is astonishing. I was very resistant to the idea when we started shooting, but I absolutely swear by it now. It's amazing, really, what you can do. But you have to be honest about it. They didn't fly as fast as we now like to think planes do fly now, but I felt in Pearl Harbor the planes flew a little bit faster than they might have done.
And if I may interject, I thought the big bomb shot was all out of proportion.
What?
To me it was.
In
Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
The big bomb that,
Yeah, the one that went down, yes.
All out of proportion, for me it was.
Yes. It was very impressively done. I certainly felt occasionally that it seemed to be taking its kind of standards from a more modern kind of computer-driven form of warfare than actually what was probably true at the time, but it's impressive nevertheless.
I was so happy to see Irene Pappas in this movie.
Well, you're one of the few people who realizes what an extraordinary, I mean, she's a legendary actress, really, and certainly in Greece and in Europe. I mean, she's a great, great tragedienne and an extraordinary woman for I mean, what she's achieved, I think, in her life is amazing.
Did she have any stories about that time in...
Oh, yeah, she had a lot. She had a lot. I mean, Greece is an extraordinary place in the sense that the roots go incredibly deep. Anybody who's lived there or been born there, well, she still does live there, and carries the whole history of the place around with them. It's one of the things that is remarkable about being able to make the film, because I think some of that idea, the continuity of that culture, is partly what the film is about. So she had certain aspects of her own history that resembled and informed what was going on in the film. And it would take too long to explain what they are, but she brought an enormous amount to it. Just an instinctive sense of how to behave. One of the interesting things is that, you know, a lot of Greek people obviously are born on the islands, of which there are a massive number, and tend to migrate to the mainland or to Athens or wherever, but they always go back to their islands, particularly in the summer months. And there's a fantastic sense of identity with the island that you come from. And Kefalonia, the island in the film, each island has a patron saint who in the kind of, and mythology is not the right word.
The doctrine?
Yes, exactly, has a particular power. And the patron saint of Kefalonia is Saint Gerasimos, whose feast day you see celebrated at the beginning and the end of the film. And his particular gift is to heal the sick, heal the mentally sick, actually. You'll find that something like 75 to 80, maybe even 90% of the males born on the island are called Gerasimos. That's why there are very few Christian names in Greece, because they all tend to be named after their own saints.
Of course, most of the people in the movie who were Greeks were too young. But did you find...
Well, not actually.
Really? Some...
No, a lot of the people who are in the film, because we filmed it in Kefalonia, and all of the townspeople and the villagers that you see in the film were Kefalonians. They were people who were there. I mean, I obviously had to communicate by interpreter with them, but I got to know them all very, very well because they were with me every day. And a large number of them remember the incidents that the film deals with. Lost people in the earthquake, had Italians living in their homes during the fighting and afterwards, and have a pretty vivid memory of everything, which was invaluable to me, obviously.
Were they in any way at all resentful that this movie was being made and bringing all this back?
No, the answer is they were... I think it's probably fair to say that there was a sort of mixture of feelings. I mean, there was a lot of... It was very traumatic for a lot of them, although essentially, of course, in the atrocities that the film deals with, it wasn't so much the Greeks that suffered as the Italians, although there were tremendous atrocities following that during the period of German occupation of the island. But it's immensely painful to them. But the attitude that I came across most often was that they were incredibly grateful for the opportunity to have this event acknowledged and honoured, was the word that they used. I mean, honoured in the sense of being acknowledged everywhere. There was one man who I spent a lot of time with who actually witnessed the worst atrocity on the island. As a boy of 15. He's now obviously a much older man. And he described in enormous and horrific detail what had happened, and in particularly the efforts that they underwent, they went through afterwards to clear up. I'm trying to tell you the story without saying exactly what happens in the film. And he was desperate for me to film that scene in the film in his village, Traianata, where this had taken place, although it took place all over the island, actually, because he wanted his village commemorated in this way. And it was very hard for me to explain to him that it was not within the logistic possibilities of the film to suddenly move the entire unit right across the island to film that scene. And I said, well, I think you should imagine that it is where your village is. But that was the attitude that was most common. I think they were thrilled in the end. I mean, they became so much a part of the film. They haven't seen it yet. We're going back to premiere the film in Kefalonia, when it opens in Greece in September.
The film has already opened in the UK.
Yes.
And I understand that it's been very, very well received.
Yeah, it has. It's done very, very well. I mean, the book, the reason we released it in the UK first is that the book, as I said earlier, is a publishing phenomenon there. It was a strange, unusual thing because the book came out and was well received critically, but not with massive fanfare. Louis de Bernière was a well-established author, but not, again, a particularly well-known one when the book came out. And very shortly after it came out, it began to develop a momentum with readers and became this colossal word-of-mouth success. I mean, it was at the top of the bestseller list for about 3 years, and has become something of a kind of a modern icon, I suppose. And it's a long, dense, quite literary book with an enormous reach, an enormous span of themes and ideas in it. But because of that, it was a British company that made it, even though there's no British element in the story, at least not in the film. There's one British character in the book, but a minor character. There was such an appetite to see the film, we decided to release it there first. We were actually going to release it in America earlier, but we decided that wasn't necessarily the best time and we were going to release it before, so we held it back till now. But yeah, no, it's done very, very well there.
And is it true that this is the most successful film Nick Cage has had?
Well, that's what I read too. I'm delighted. Yeah, but apparently it is. I'm thrilled for him. I find that kind of interesting because you think that, Con Air and Face Off, and yes, apparently it's a box office best for Nick, which is great. I mean, I wasn't specifically aware of that until I read it recently, but I mean, that's obviously true.
One last question, and I must get a Shakespeare in Love question because I love that picture so much. And I was delighted for you it won 7 Oscars, isn't
Yes,
it? And you were nominated as
Yes.
Best Director, but
Yes.
it was one of those instances where the Best Director went to somebody else.
Yes. Not
And
just somebody else, the body else.
But my question is, with the BAFTA Awards, which are the counterpart of the Academy Awards in Great Britain, does that ever happen with the BAFTA Awards?
Yeah, quite frequently actually, more frequently in a funny kind of a way. The difference there is that if you win Best Film there, which the film did, Shakespeare in Love won it there as well, the director is also, gets one of the statues. I mean, I don't know why that should be so important, but whereas, as the American Academy, it's the producers who get the statue if it wins Best Film. But it's not uncommon. As a matter of fact, I didn't win the Best Director in England either, but nor did Steven Spielberg. It was won by Peter Weir for Truman Show there.
Really?
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, a lot of people talk about that and say, well, how can a film doesn't direct itself? If it wins Best Film, it should win Best Director. And I think that's true, but if it wins Best Film, you're getting the award, it seems to me. I mean, that's more important to me. That was the much more important thing to me, that it won that. I mean, not that we were expecting it, God knows, but that was enough of an accolade as far as I'm concerned.
After the Best Director was awarded,
Yeah.
then did you think that your movie had no chance, and were you surprised when they said Best Picture? Shakespeare in
Yes,
Love?
I mean, obviously the moment is pretty engraved on the memory. What I remember was what I'm sure if you looked at the replays of it now would seem a relatively short pause after Harrison Ford opened the envelope and said, "And the winner is," but it was a very significant pause, and it seemed an eternity to me and us, I think, at the time. And at that moment, I suddenly felt something was happening because I thought, well, he'd say it right away, because I think it was what everybody in the room was expecting. but the pause seemed to be a pause of, wondering whether he was reading it right or whether it was just an actor's sense of drama. I'm not quite sure what it was, but I think at that moment, it was pretty astonishing. Pretty astonishing. I mean, it was, you don't really think terribly logically that, and we were on a, we'd won 6 awards by then, and that was pretty amazing. But I think everybody assumed that Saving Private Ryan was going to get it at that point.
Well, both are wonderful pictures, and if you could give 2 awards for that kind of picture and that kind of picture, it would seem more fair.
Well, I to be honest, it's all such a crapshoot, that stuff, and it is, in a sense, it's kind of nutty to be comparing, Saving Private Ryan with Shakespeare in Love or anything with anything. And it's such a cliche, but the nominations, I think, are perhaps the more significant things because that way you're saying, okay, these films were all distinguished in some way. But of course the world loves a race, and and the race is fun and exciting, and everybody loves a winner.
Well, John, you've got a winner with Captain Corelli's Mandolin.
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled.
I really loved it.
Good.
And I'll be so happy to tell people that I recommend it.
Thank you. Thank you.
John.
Nice to see you again, Bobbie.
What you would call the moviola. The sound emanating as you're going slowly through the soundtrack is all one note. It is, John.
It's true, I know. No, he
It's
has
all
quite a
one note.
monotone voice, it's true.
And an editor I had one time discovered that, and he said, in all my years of editing, I've never run into that. Isn't that extraordinary?
Yes, I suppose so. That sort of laconic thing he's got. Yes, it's true, actually.
But he makes it work for himself.
Yeah, he does. He does.
But in interviewing him, you off just to
Absolutely.
yeah, you've done this a jillion times. What reactions did you get from some of the Greek people on the island about making this kind of movie and bringing this incident to the fore?
I think there were a mixture of emotions. A lot of, certainly when the character David Morrissey, who plays the German Captain Weber, appeared in his uniform, a lot of people kind of flinched.
That's good. Okay. Nicolas Cage in this movie has to have Nicolas Cage in this movie has to have an Italian accent. He has to play the mandolin. He's wearing an Italian uniform. A lot of challenges.
Yeah, no, a lot of challenges, and I think that was what attracted him to the role in the first place. But learning a musical instrument was the
That's good. Okay.
just as well, actually. I was about to choke.
You want to take
No, I'm fine.
Oh, okay.
I'm fine.
Now
That's
what?
the heat, I should think, isn't it? Oh, no. Sounded like my fire alarm at home.
Oh, should I continue? Yeah, okay. So what you're saying is that Nick Cage actually is playing the mandolin, but the sound we hear is another instrument by another player.
It is. I don't want to sort of diminish the fact that he was playing, because he was playing, but we couldn't use the same instrument that we see in the picture.
Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll
Yeah.
then pick
I
it up with
understand.
that,
I understand.
that
Don't worry.
explanation.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Were the war scenes the most difficult ones for you as the director?
Yeah, they were tough. I mean, they're a huge logistical issue, those scenes. You just, it's really about man management and machine management, and the technology is blah, blah, blah.
Okay. Was Irene Pappas any help to you as far as her own Greek heritage?
Yes, invaluable, really. I mean, she's an extraordinary woman with such a kind of massive wealth of experience in my field, as well as, I mean, she's a director and she's a great tragedienne, and she's been acting for years.
Okay, let me check here just a second. Yeah, I'll get to that one. Okay. Was the novel inspired by any real people?
It was inspired by real events, as you know, and there has been some speculation that he based the character of Corelli, Louis de Benya based the character of Corelli on a man called Pamploni, but it's...
That's good, that's good. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll do the Shakespeare. Does it ever happen with the BAFTA? Does it happen with the BAFTA awards, which are the counterpart of the Academy Awards, where director and picture don't match up?
It does happen from time to time, and it's slightly less bad if you're left out in the directing category because you get a statue, you know, if your movie wins Best Film.
Okay, and let's see then. After the Best Director Oscar was awarded, then did you think you didn't have a chance for Best Picture?
At the time that it was happening, it was all happening pretty fast, and I think your mind's kind of racing, really. But I think, yes, the assumption was that it would go in Saving Private Ryan's direction.
Okay, I think they'll get it. I think that we'll get it.